Tonight we drift backward through time, across the pale dust of deserts and the slow, heavy breath of the Nile. You can almost taste the warmth in the air, the way it clings to your tongue like honey baked in sunlight. The stars hang low enough to touch, but they offer no breeze, no relief from the dry murmur of eternity. Around you, the reeds sway, whispering of gods with animal heads and people who feared sweat more than sin. In this strange world, one truth rises shimmering from the sand. If you were an Egyptian priest, you would shave absolutely everything. Not just your head, not just your face, every last strand from your body would be gone, as if the desert itself demanded it. And yes, that includes the places you're now quietly hoping it doesn't. You probably wouldn't survive the first week of temple life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before a temple at dawn, its walls the color of old bone, its hieroglyphs glowing faintly as the sun begins its climb. The air is still, except for the lazy buzz of an insect that dares to exist here, until a robed figure swats it away. You notice the man's gleaming scalp, smooth as an egg, his eyebrows faint ghosts of themselves. He looks like a statue come to life. This is no ordinary priest. This is a servant of Ra, sworn to purity so complete it makes modern cleanliness look like a half-hearted shower. He walks barefoot, his steps leaving perfect ovals in the sand. You follow, watching as he enters a small stone room where bowls of water shimmer beside tools that catch the light, bronze razors, curved like smiles, waiting for the day's first ritual. You hear the faint scrape of metal against skin. He doesn't flinch. The razor has become his morning prayer. For Egyptian priests, shaving wasn't vanity, it was obedience. The gods, they believed, detested the messy and the natural. Hair was chaos, a reminder of the wildness that civilization fought to tame. To serve in a temple meant becoming an emblem of order, the living embodiment of Ma'at, the principle of balance that kept the world from collapsing back into darkness. Historians still argue whether this obsession with smoothness began as a hygienic practice or a spiritual symbol, but either way, it ruled their lives like the flooding of the Nile. You trail behind the priest as he pours perfumed water over his arms. The scent of lotus fills the air, mingling with the damp, metallic tang of shaved skin. It's oddly calming, ritual and rhythm blending into something that feels eternal. You imagine the first priests learning these motions centuries earlier, the same gestures repeated until they became sacred muscle memory. One stroke for the gods, one for the self, one to erase the line between the two. It's almost funny how much effort they put into not being human. You can picture them debating whose razor was sharper or whose scalp gleamed brightest under temple lamps. Somewhere in a corner, a novice sneezes, and everyone glances over in silent disapproval. After all, purity doesn't come cheap. But even with all this careful discipline, you sense the human undercurrent, the pride in perfection, the relief of cool air on freshly shaved skin, the tiny sting that proves devotion has a cost. The temple itself hums softly, a chorus of chanting voices rising as incense burns. You notice how every priest, dozens of them, shares the same featureless smoothness. No beards, no eyebrows, no stray curls escaping from under linen wraps. They look almost identical, like copies made from the same divine mold. Their God demanded it, yes, but their society rewarded it. To be clean-shaven was to be civilized, educated, trustworthy. Hair, on the other hand, belonged to foreigners, peasants, and troublemakers. And yet, despite all their grooming, you can't help but wonder if it was worth it. Did they ever miss the feeling of a breeze rustling through their hair? Did they ever envy the workers outside, sweaty and dusty but free from ritual? There's no record of complaints, no priestly diary scribbling "my scalp itches." but you suspect the occasional sigh must have escaped those pristine lips. One curious fragment from an ancient text mentions that priests shaved every 2 days, sometimes even twice a day during festivals. That's an extreme commitment, especially when your tools are dull bronze and your mirrors are polished copper. Imagine nicking yourself right before a ceremony meant to honor a god of perfection. No pressure, right? A papyrus from the reign of Thutmose III even describes how barbers were employed full-time within temple complexes. Their job wasn't just to trim and scrape. They were, in a sense, co-priests, responsible for maintaining the outward sign of holiness. Some scholars argue that this made them part of the temple's inner order, a class of sacred barbers whose blades bridged the line between flesh and spirit. Others say they were merely servants, valued for steady hands rather than faith. Historians still argue whether they were blessed or expendable. Outside, the sun climbs higher. The light turns the white limestone blinding, and the priests begin their processions. Each one gleams, every inch of them deliberate, perfect. The idea of hair now feels absurd, almost rebellious. You imagine showing up here with a 5 o'clock shadow. You'd be exiled to the goat pens before you could blink. Still, you notice something endearing in their devotion. Beneath the rigid rules and sharp razors lies a longing for connection, to gods, to order, to something bigger than the chaos of human life. You get it. Maybe your version isn't shaving your head bald, but you, too, have rituals, checking your phone before bed, lining up your pillows just so, creating order before surrendering to sleep. It's not so different, really. As the day fades, the priests bathe again, scrubbing themselves with natron salt until their skin squeaks. You can almost feel the sting on your own arms, the grainy drag of sand against skin. They dry in the fading light, pure once more, ready to meet the divine. Tomorrow, they'll do it again. And the next day. And the next. Eternity smells faintly of lotus oil and copper. The morning heat presses down again, and you find yourself trailing the same priest as he walks toward the temple's inner court. The sand shifts beneath your feet, soft as flour, and every breath tastes faintly of salt and stone. You can hear the faint scrape of sandals, the whisper of linen robes, and somewhere, the deep bell-like croak of a heron near the river. The world feels ancient but strangely tidy. No clutter, no cluttered hair, no chaos. Everything, including the priests, has been stripped down to its essence. You notice the way he moves, careful not to disturb the hush of the temple's morning routine. The air smells of incense and river water, and somewhere close, the steady sound of shaving continues, a reminder that purification isn't a one-time act but a constant rhythm. Sweat gathers on your neck, but no one here seems to acknowledge the heat. You're beginning to see that in Egypt, cleanliness wasn't just comfort, it was survival. It starts with sweat, of course. You're in a land where temperatures can roast clay into brick and where a full day in the sun can turn a healthy man into a crisp. Imagine working by the Nile in those conditions. Mosquitoes dive-bombing your neck, sand collecting in every crease of your skin, and a sheen of sweat that never truly dries. Add a few layers of linen and a hay-filled scalp beneath a headdress, and you've got a portable sauna. Egyptians were nothing if not practical. Less hair meant less sweat, fewer lice, and less odor. But for the priests, hygiene crossed into holiness. The gods were pure beings, untouched by decay or filth, and every act of worship had to mirror that ideal. To approach a god with body hair was to bring the wild into the sacred. It's like showing up to a job interview in muddy boots, only the employer in question is a deity with a short temper. As you walk further into the temple courtyard, you pass rows of pools glinting in the light. This is where priests bathed before every ritual, sometimes 4, even 5 times a day. They used natron, a naturally occurring salt that stung open pores but left skin smooth and dry. One ancient inscription casually mentions that the odor of the impure offends the nostrils of the gods. You can almost hear a priest muttering this as he scrubs, annoyed but resigned, like someone reciting workplace safety regulations. It's easy to picture the contrast outside the temple walls. Farmers with shaggy beards, fishers with tangled hair crusted in salt, laborers whose sweat was their perfume. To the priests, that was chaos incarnate, disorder in human form. Inside, everything gleamed, everything smelled faintly of myrrh and lotus. And everyone's skin, yours included if you belonged here, would feel like polished stone. There's a strange irony in how much work it took to seem effortless. You catch sight of another priest holding a bronze mirror, checking his reflection before a ceremony. The mirror catches a flicker of sun, and for a heartbeat, it blinds you. When your eyes adjust, you realize he's studying himself with quiet intensity. He's not admiring beauty so much as policing perfection. You can sense the unspoken fear, one stray hair, one speck of dirt, and the divine might look away. Some modern historians still argue whether these priests truly believed in the supernatural consequence of impurity, or whether the rituals simply became tradition over time, a social code that no one dared break. It's the same question that lingers in many ancient practices. Did they shave for the gods, or for each other? As you follow the priest deeper inside, the light fades. The walls here are cool to the touch, carved with scenes of gods receiving offerings from immaculate men. You notice something subtle: every single figure, the kings, the priests, even the servants, is bald. Hair, in Egyptian art, is almost always a marker of the ordinary or the untamed. The clean head gleams with authority. It's the crown of control. And control was everything. To the Egyptians, the universe itself was a delicate balance between order, ma'at, and chaos, isfet. The Nile's predictable flooding was a divine promise that order still reigned. But hair, in all its unruly glory, was the opposite, a symbol of nature unchecked. You, as a priest, existed to hold back that tide of disorder. Shaving was less about hygiene now, more about cosmic duty. The temple smells faintly of frankincense. You can see small braziers where the smoke curls upward, like offerings made of air. You're told that before a priest could even touch these sacred fires, he had to be cleansed and hairless. Not even a single eyelash could fall into the offering flame. Somewhere, you hear a voice chanting softly, a low murmur that blends with the crackle of burning resin. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you understand, smoothness wasn't vanity. It was surrender. Still, there's humor hidden in all this sanctity. You imagine a priest late for morning duty, realizing he's missed a patch behind his ear. Does he risk divine wrath or try to fix it with a quick scrape by candlelight? You suspect even the gods might forgive that. Maybe. Outside, life goes on as usual. Traders haggle over spices, children chase each other through dusty alleys, and soldiers with bristly stubble swagger through the marketplace. You notice how sharply the priests stand apart. Their bald heads gleam like moons among mortals. Their scent, sandalwood and sweet oil, cuts through the air like a quiet declaration: we are not like you. The deeper you go into this world, the more you realize how purity wasn't about being clean the way you think of it. It was about transformation. The body, stripped of its wildness, became a vessel for something divine. The razor was their baptism. And yet, there's always a sliver of irony. The more they scrubbed away the natural, the more artificial their perfection became. They were human beings pretending to be gods, one shave at a time. Perhaps they knew that deep down. Maybe, when the day's rituals ended and the temple fell silent, they ran a palm over their bare scalp and felt, not holiness, but relief, an ancient sigh that said, I made it through another day without offending eternity. As the sun sets, The temple walls glow gold, and the smooth heads of the priests catch the last light like mirrors. The Nile flows past, eternal and patient, carrying away the day's dust. You wonder if it's the same dust they've been shaving off themselves for thousands of years. Probably. Tomorrow, the razors will scrape again. The water will sting. The prayers will rise. And you, still watching, might begin to understand that beneath all the ritual, all the discipline, lies something universal. The desire to be pure in a world that never stops getting messy. The next morning comes with that familiar dry sigh of wind, brushing across your skin like a silk ribbon pulled through dust. The light of dawn spreads low and heavy, turning the temple's white walls to molten gold. You're back beside the priests again, except this time, you're closer, so close you can smell the faint sweetness of their oils and the metallic tang of bronze waiting to bite. Today is a day of ceremony, and before anything divine can begin, razors must sing. You follow one priest as he kneels near a pool of cool water, his reflection trembling in the ripples. He's older than the others, lines carved deep into his face, yet not a trace of hair anywhere. You watch as he unwraps a small linen bundle, revealing tools laid out with obsessive care, a bronze razor, curved like the crescent moon, a small bowl of oil, a polished copper mirror so clear you can see your own face in it, though it's warped by time. He dips the blade in water, then presses it to his scalp with slow, deliberate grace. The first scrape breaks the silence. You wince slightly at the sound, it's faint but sharp, like tearing parchment. The priest does not flinch. He's done this countless times, each motion rehearsed, each breath matched to the rhythm of the razor. You realize this isn't just grooming. This is liturgy. Egyptian priests were required to shave before every ritual. Not occasionally, not once a week, but before each act of worship. The reasoning was simple and divine. To offer prayers, you must first offer your body in perfect form. Even a single hair, historians say, could invalidate a ceremony if found floating in the sacred water or clinging to an offering. There's a record of one priest who delayed a royal ritual because a wind gust blew sand into the purification basin. Imagine the panic if it had been dandruff instead. You can almost hear the temple supervisor muttering, "Unacceptable. Start again." The razor's glide continues, slow and measured. Tiny curls of hair drift down, caught by the breeze, and vanish into the sand. You notice the priest's breathing. It's almost meditative, like he's syncing his pulse to the act. To shave here isn't a mundane routine, it's an exorcism of chaos, every stroke driving out disorder. And as he works, the air fills with faint murmurs, other priests whispering prayers while they groom, invoking gods to cleanse not just the skin but the soul. One curious tablet discovered near Thebes mentions that priests even shaved their eyebrows and lashes. The logic, apparently, was total elimination of anything that could fall out or trap dust. You picture a group of completely lashless men blinking solemnly at one another, and you can't help but think they must have looked perpetually surprised. A strange beauty, perhaps, in that blankness. The priest now oils his skin, the bronze catching light in golden arcs as he moves. You smell frankincense, lotus, maybe a hint of myrrh. The combination is dizzying, clean and ancient, like the perfume of eternity. You dip your fingers into the water beside him, and it's surprisingly cold. The Nile, even in summer, holds the memory of distant mountains. It cools the blade, calms the sting, carries away what no longer belongs. In this moment, you understand how physical devotion became a language. The gods didn't demand words, they demanded gestures. To shave was to speak purity without sound. Historians still argue whether these rituals were acts of love, fear, or simple obedience. But as you watch, you sense something deeper, habit so refined it becomes faith. The priest finishes his head and moves to his chest, his arms, his legs. The same precision, the same rhythm. The razor gleams, flashes, vanishes. You notice how smooth his skin becomes, how it almost glows under the morning sun. There's a small cut near his collarbone, a bead of blood welling up like a ruby. He doesn't stop. The cut, you suspect, is its own offering. Nearby, a young acolyte waits with a fresh linen cloth. He looks nervous, fidgeting with the hem of his robe. Maybe it's his first day assisting. The priest hands him the razor, and for a moment, their eyes meet, teacher and student, both solemn, both silent. The boy bows, then carries the blade off carefully, as though holding something alive. You imagine what it must feel like to be entrusted with a tool that touches holiness and skin in equal measure. Now comes the next phase. The priest takes a palmful of oil and rubs it along his scalp, letting it shine. The fragrance rises, light and sweet. Around you, dozens of others do the same. The entire courtyard fills with the glow of oiled heads, glinting like a field of lanterns. The sound of their movement, the scrape of razor, the soft splash of water, creates a strange harmony, both mundane and transcendent. You're reminded of modern mornings, the hum of electric shavers, the hiss of running taps, the sigh before stepping into the day. The tools have changed, but the ritual remains. We still polish ourselves before facing the world. We still fear what others might see if we show up unprepared. One historian once called this cosmetic piety, the belief that godliness could be achieved through appearance. It's easy to mock from afar, but as you stand here, surrounded by the scent of oils and the hum of devotion, you begin to see how much power ritual holds. The body becomes a script, written in the language of repetition. You glance at the water again, now cloudy with what's been removed, tiny fragments of hair floating like dark dust. The priest tips the bowl toward the Nile, letting the current swallow it. The symbolism is clear. Impurity belongs to the river, not the temple. You half expect the river to whisper back in gratitude. A light breeze passes, stirring your robe. Somewhere above, an ibis cries, its voice sharp and distant. The priests begin to gather their things, preparing for the ceremony inside. Their skin gleams, their scent lingers, their silence deepens. You feel oddly calm watching them. The repetition, the care, the strange precision, it's hypnotic. You realize that, in a way, these shavings were small rehearsals for eternity. Life itself, to them, was one long ritual of cleansing before the afterlife. As the last priest finishes and rises, you notice how the morning sun strikes his scalp just so, and for a heartbeat, he looks divine, not because he's flawless, but because he's trying. The ceremony ends, but the echo of chants still vibrates in the air like bees circling the edges of silence. You step out into the courtyard again, where the light has changed, hotter now, heavier, the kind that presses everything flat and still. The priests move quietly among one another, gliding rather than walking, and for the first time, you begin to see what all this smoothness means. It isn't just about staying clean, it's about control. When you catch sight of their shining heads in the sunlight, it's hard not to notice the symbolism. Every one of them gleams like polished alabaster. You think of how chaotic the world beyond the temple must have seemed to them. Dust storms tearing across the horizon, locusts devouring crops, the unpredictable moods of the Nile. But inside these walls, everything bends to human will. Hair, that stubborn reminder of the body's rebellion, has no place here. To be hairless is to be unassailable, perfect, divine, or at least to look the part. The Egyptians understood the power of appearances better than most civilizations. The pharaoh's regalia, the symmetry of hieroglyphs, even the way a loaf of bread was shaped, all of it was an attempt to mirror cosmic order. When you run your hand across your own arm now, feeling the invisible prick of imaginary stubble, You begin to sense how the priests lived in a constant awareness of every inch of their skin. There's a saying carved in faint hieroglyphs near one of the temple pools: "The god sees not the unshaven." It's both a warning and a promise. A priest's smoothness wasn't simply a badge of faith, it was his currency of worth. The more perfectly hairless he was, the closer he stood to divinity. You follow one priest as he steps into a shadowed colonnade. His sandals whisper over the cool stone, and you notice how people outside the temple give him a wide bow. Farmers lower their gazes. Merchants pause mid-haggle. Even soldiers, men used to swaggering, let him pass in silence. His skin reflects the sunlight like a divine signal. Smoothness, it seems, commands respect. This is where you start to see the paradox. The very act that symbolized humility before the gods also became a display of status. Hairlessness was holiness, yes, but it was also power. The priests' control over their own bodies mirrored their control over knowledge, ritual, and even the economy. They read the stars, handled the offerings, whispered the language of gods the common people couldn't pronounce. And so the gleaming head became not only a mark of cleanliness but of privilege. You can't help but grin a little at the thought: ancient Egypt's elite skincare influencers. Imagine a priest explaining to a young novice, "No, you can't use that oil, it'll clog your pores and offend Osiris." Somewhere nearby, you hear the rustle of papyrus scrolls. A scribe sits cross-legged, noting temple inventories, his reed pen scratching softly. You lean closer, catching sight of a line describing razors of finest bronze, belonging to the House of Life. They are not mere tools, they are catalogued as sacred objects. In a world where the divine could inhabit anything, even a blade could carry holiness. Historians still argue whether priests were required to maintain their smoothness even outside temple hours, or whether it was strictly ceremonial. Some records suggest full-time devotion, no hair, ever, no matter the season. Others hint that between rituals, priests could relax, let stubble bloom briefly like forbidden weeds. You imagine one sneaking a hand to his jawline at night, feeling the faint rasp and thinking, "Just until dawn." Still, to live like this, to erase part of yourself daily, must have changed how they thought about identity. You sense that every scrape of the razor wasn't only about cleanliness but about transformation. The body became a blank canvas, free of worldly clutter. Smoothness wasn't the goal, it was the medium through which they painted holiness. The older priest from before, your silent guide through these days, now stands near a column etched with scenes of Ra's solar boat. He touches the carved sun disk lightly, almost affectionately. The light hits him in such a way that his head flares golden for a moment, as though reflecting the sun god himself. You realize then that this gleam wasn't accidental, it was theater. A living mirror to honor the divine radiance. And it worked. People believed the priests shone because they carried the god's light. The smoother the scalp, the purer the vessel. The smoother the vessel, the closer the heavens bent toward earth. There's a small, almost hidden relief on the lower wall, a depiction of a priest offering incense while a servant behind him shaves his leg mid-ritual. It's absurdly mundane and beautiful at once, holiness maintained in real time. You can't help but smirk. Even in the middle of a sacred ceremony, someone had to worry about a stray hair. In modern terms, this is the ancient equivalent of checking your reflection before a big meeting. Except your boss is the sun. You start to notice something else too, how comfortless this perfection must have been. The temple stones are cool, but the air outside is merciless. Without hair, the skin burns easily. So priests protected themselves with layers of linen and constant oiling, their lives a delicate balance between devotion and sunburn. Ancient Egyptian medicine even records recipes for the relief of priestly heat sores, made from honey and crushed lotus seeds. Apparently, Being holy came with dermatological side effects. There's an odd charm in that detail. Holiness, it seems, was itchy business. You pause at the temple's edge and look toward the river. The reflection of the priest's heads ripples in the water, little suns dancing on the surface. The scene is quiet, almost hypnotic. You realize now that their gleaming smoothness wasn't just about appearance, it was about being seen. In a world ruled by symbols, visibility was divinity. The light bouncing off their skin was a silent message. We are the intermediaries between gods and men. It's easy to forget that these were humans, men who sneezed, itched, stubbed toes, and worried about mosquito bites. Yet through relentless ritual, they sculpted themselves into symbols of cosmic order. And as the day wanes, the air cooling just slightly, you can almost feel the strange satisfaction that must have come with that illusion of perfection. Tomorrow, when the sun rises again, they'll polish themselves once more, bronze blades whispering against skin, mirrors gleaming, faith renewed stroke by stroke. And you? You might just start to envy them a little. Their devotion, their discipline, their certainty that smoothness could mean salvation. By midday, the air is thick enough to chew. The temple hums quietly, its stones radiating the sun they've swallowed since dawn. You're trailing behind the same priest as he exits the main sanctuary, heading toward a shaded courtyard where bowls of oil glisten beside bundles of linen. The scent hits you first, fragrant and strange, lotus, almond, and something faintly animal. It's both beautiful and faintly unsettling, like perfume left too long in the heat. This is where the secret side of purity unfolds. It isn't all bronze razors and divine light. It's sweat, dirt, and very human improvisation. Egyptian priests weren't just spiritual guides, they were hygiene innovators. They had to be. In a land where the air baked you alive and the Nile carried the ghosts of 1,000 crocodiles, staying clean was an act of survival as much as faith. You watch as the priest dips his fingers into a small jar of golden oil. The texture is thick, gleaming like melted honey. He rubs it into his arms, then across his smooth scalp, the scent wafting sweet and spicy. The mixture, historians think, was made of moringa oil, myrrh, and sometimes animal fat. It acted as both moisturizer and insect repellent. The gods hated impurities, but the priests hated mosquitoes more. And then there's the more infamous ingredient, crocodile dung. Yes, that crocodile dung. You glance at a small clay pot in the corner, sealed tight with wax. Inside, rumor has it, is a blend of dung and sour milk used not just as sunscreen but, occasionally, as a contraceptive. You can't help but imagine a priest carefully dabbing it on his bald scalp, squinting against the glare, muttering a quiet prayer that the sun god would overlook the smell. A fringe papyrus even claims that temple attendants prepared special sacred creams, using powdered alabaster, honey, and dung filtered through linen. Whether it actually worked as sunscreen is debatable. Historians still argue whether these mixtures protected the skin or simply tested one's faith. But the intent was sincere, to keep the body pure, untarnished, and God-pleasing. Nearby, another priest unwraps a bundle of linen cloths. Each strip is soaked in scented water and used to wipe the skin before applying oils. There's something rhythmic about it. Wipe, oil, polish. You could almost mistake the scene for a spa, except the clients here are servants of eternity. The young acolytes assisting them handle every vessel like a relic. You realize that every act of hygiene, no matter how mundane, has been elevated to ritual. You bend closer to one of the jars, and the smell sharpens, spiced and earthy. You swear you catch a hint of cinnamon, imported from far-off lands. These priests lived in a world of scent. Every odor was a message. Sweetness meant sanctity, foulness meant corruption. The very air was moral. It makes sense why they shaved so religiously, hair trapped smells, and smells told on you. One of the older priests sits nearby, muttering as he scrapes residue from a bowl with a bronze spatula. His scalp gleams, but his brow furrows in concentration. He's mixing something thicker, something sticky and waxy. A fringe recipe from Edfu describes a depilatory made from beeswax and sugar, applied warm to the skin and pulled off with linen strips. You wince at the thought. So yes, the priests might just have invented waxing. Ancient Egypt, birthplace of geometry, medicine, and the bikini wax. He applies a thin layer to his arm, waits, and then yanks it off without flinching. You can almost hear the collective wince of modern viewers through time. The strip leaves the skin gleaming, hairless, reddened slightly, a perfect offering to the gods of pain tolerance. You murmur to yourself that devotion must have had a high threshold for discomfort. And yet, you can't deny the allure of their world. For them, cleanliness wasn't a chore, it was identity. Every drop of oil, every grain of natron salt, every wax strip was a way to maintain connection with the divine. They lived in a feedback loop of faith and hygiene: scrub, pray, repeat. One record from the Temple of Karnak even describes a ritual where priests perfumed themselves 5 times a day to align with the 5 parts of the soul. The act of anointing wasn't vanity, it was theology made tactile. You imagine a priest closing his eyes, breathing in the sweet smoke of incense, feeling the oil seep into his pores, and whispering to himself, "I am clean enough to be seen." The courtyard hums with low conversation. A few novices giggle softly as they struggle to balance a bowl of perfumed water without spilling it. Their elder glares but says nothing. You catch his expression, it's equal parts patience and pity. They'll learn, he seems to think, that the gods have no tolerance for clumsiness or sweat. Still, there's a warmth to the scene, a humanity beneath the sanctity. You see a priest discreetly wipe his nose with the corner of his linen robe, another fanning himself with a palm frond. Even perfection gets tired. You smile at that. The gods may demand polish, but the humans delivering it still itch and sigh like everyone else. The heat thickens, but the scent of lotus lingers, almost musical in the air. You can hear the Nile not far away, its steady murmur like breath against the silence. You picture the priests bathing again at sunset, washing away not only dust but also the exhaustion of constant vigilance. For them, there was no difference between scrubbing and praying. They both aimed to erase something invisible. And somewhere, between the fragrance of oils and the hiss of beeswax, you begin to understand the beauty of it all. In a world where death was certain and decay inevitable, these priests found a small rebellion. To be clean, even temporarily, was to defy time. Smoothness was their version of immortality. You watch as the last of the priests finish anointing themselves, their oiled heads glowing in the amber light. For a brief moment, as the sun begins to lower, they look like a field of tiny suns themselves, mirrors reflecting eternity. You wonder if the gods ever looked down and mistook them for stars. By evening, the temple begins to cool. The sandstone holds onto the day's heat like a secret, radiating it back in soft waves that make the air shimmer. The priests move through the courtyard again, their freshly anointed skin catching the last light, their robes whispering against the stone. Somewhere, a copper bowl clinks, one of those small, mundane sounds that you realize must have filled every holy place back then, just as much as chanting or incense ever did. Tonight, the ritual of shaving begins again, not out of necessity now, but out of rhythm. The body's hair grows in defiance, and the razor answers like a hymn. You kneel beside the same basin you saw that morning, still cool from the Nile's gift, and watch the preparations unfold. The tools are simple, yet beautiful. Each one feels like it carries a personality. Bronze razors curved in half moons, their handles worn smooth from decades of use. Small alabaster jars for oil and resin, linen cloths folded in perfect squares, and flat river stones used to sharpen the blades. The sound of sharpening fills the courtyard, metal against mineral, a scraping lullaby that somehow feels older than language. You take in the scene slowly. There's no rush here, no chatter. Each movement is measured, deliberate. The priests handle their razors with reverence, as if each stroke could summon or offend a god. You can imagine the weight of that thought, the constant awareness that one slip of the blade might draw not just blood, but divine disapproval. A younger priest crouches near a brazier, warming a small pot of beeswax. You can hear the faint hiss as it melts, the smell thick and sweet, almost edible. He stirs it with a bronze spatula, careful not to let it boil over. Across from him, another priest dips his razor into a shallow dish of river water mixed with natron, polishing the edge before the first cut. The moonlight catches the metal and throws a soft gleam across the courtyard. The first sound of shaving begins, a gentle scrape, rhythmic, soothing in its repetition. It's not the harsh buzz of a modern machine, but something intimate, handmade. The bronze blade glides over skin slicked with oil, leaving a faint track of perfection. You watch as the priest tilts his head toward the light, eyes closed in concentration. It feels almost like a trance. Historians still debate whether these razors were sharpened daily or weekly. Bronze, after all, dulls fast. Some say the temple barbers carried small whetstones everywhere, constantly refining the edges. Others think the priests themselves became skilled metalworkers, maintaining their own tools like soldiers polishing swords. Either way, the result was the same, blades honed sharp enough to cut devotion itself. You crouch near one of the barbers, an older man with a calm, unreadable face. His hands move with absolute precision. He works on a senior priest, scraping his jawline, then wiping the blade clean on a linen cloth. The act feels both intimate and ceremonial, like confession without words. The barber hums softly under his breath, an old melody, maybe one passed down through generations. It's here that you realize just how intertwined technology and faith were in ancient Egypt. Every act of worship required craftsmanship. The gods weren't only served by prayers, but by metal workers, oil pressers, linen weavers, and barbers, each one a small cog in the great cosmic machine. The razor, humble as it looks, was as sacred as any scepter. The scent of beeswax thickens as the younger priests begin applying it in strips, their movements brisk and practiced. They smooth the warm wax across their arms and legs, let it cool, and then pull it away with a quick flick of linen. The sound, snap, breaks the silence like a heartbeat. You half expect someone to yelp, but none do. The discipline here is absolute. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's faith. Maybe it's the knowledge that pain, too, is a form of purification. A soft breeze drifts in from the Nile, stirring the torches. The flames ripple, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. You can see the priests' silhouettes, elegant, almost abstract. Smooth heads, lean shoulders, arms rising and falling in the ritual rhythm of cleansing. It's mesmerizing, like watching a slow-moving tide. You think of the countless generations who performed this same routine. Centuries before bronze gave way to iron, before temples fell to sand, there were still these same small gestures. The scrape, the polish, the sigh of cool water. Civilization itself, you realize, is built on repetition. The small things that make the sacred possible. One curious thing you notice. After each shaving, a priest pours a few drops of oil into the basin, murmuring something under his breath. It's an offering, you suspect, a way to acknowledge that even self-maintenance is part of divine order. The body is a temple, but only if you clean it like one. You can't help but laugh softly to yourself. Somewhere, far in the future, people will buy expensive temple spa packages, never realizing they're imitating the same gestures, chasing the same feeling of renewal. The courtyard quiets again. The last of the razors are rinsed in perfumed water, laid neatly on linen. The barbers step back, their work done. The priests rise, glowing in the soft lamplight. Their skin reflects fire and moon alike. They look at peace, smooth, spotless, shining with the pride of the newly made. You follow as they step toward the temple's inner gates. The massive doors open silently, the scent of incense rushing out to meet them. They'll pray now, as always, in the purified state the gods demand. And as they vanish into the dark, you feel a strange pull, a wish to follow, to see what lies beyond the veil of the clean and the holy. The courtyard is empty now except for the tools. Blades cooling in the air, jars glistening, the faint echo of ritual hanging like a hum in the stone. Somewhere far off, a night bird cries. You glance at the razors and realize they aren't just instruments. They are relics of discipline, quiet reminders that even the divine needs routine. The moon glides higher, painting the courtyard silver. The wax in the brazier hardens again, the air smells faintly of honey and copper, and you feel a calm settle over you. Maybe the gods never cared whether a priest missed a hair or two. Maybe the act of trying, the endless, careful maintenance of order in a chaotic world, was what holiness really meant. And you, standing there in the cooling air, start to feel the same. The sound of chanting drifts through the heavy dusk as the priests move deeper into the heart of the temple. You follow, bare feet whispering against the cool flagstones, the scent of oil and lotus lingering behind them like a trail of smoke. The air changes here. It grows thicker, quieter, more sacred. The temple walls narrow, carved with endless hieroglyphs that tell stories of gods, kings, and the eternal balance of Ma'at, order against chaos. Every symbol gleams faintly in the torchlight, like the temple itself is breathing. You notice how spotless everything is. No cobwebs, no dust, no stray sand from the desert outside. The priest's obsession with cleanliness extends to every inch of their world. Even the torches seem to burn without smoke, leaving the air pure. It's as if the gods might step through at any moment, and they'd better find their house immaculate. The priests stop before a great statue of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom. His marble eyes seem to watch the room. You can't help but feel that he approves, or judges. The head priest steps forward, holding a small alabaster cup filled with sweet-smelling oil. He pours it carefully at the statue's base, whispering words so soft you can't quite catch them. The ritual begins. The priests fan out, their movements synchronized, smooth as a flock of birds. Some light incense, others sprinkle water drawn from the Nile, and a few kneel to polish the temple floor with cloths soaked in myrrh. You realize now that their cleanliness isn't just about themselves, it's about the gods' comfort. A dirty temple would be an insult, a kind of cosmic faux pas. Historians still argue whether the priests truly believed the gods dwelled in these statues, or if they saw them as symbolic gateways. Either way, the ritual is real enough. Each morning and night, the gods were bathed, anointed, and clothed, just like the priests themselves. The relationship is almost domestic, like caretakers tending to an elderly but powerful guest who must always be treated with devotion and fear. You imagine the long line of priests who have performed this same ritual through the centuries, each one hairless, gleaming, perfumed. They would wake before dawn, bathe, shave, oil their skin, and then enter this sanctuary to care for a god that never slept. Their smoothness wasn't vanity, it was camouflage. They wanted to look as divine as possible while serving divinity. A fringed tablet from Saqqara describes how the priests believed unshaven hair could offend the gods because it was a sign of animal nature. Humans were meant to be refined, civilized, closer to gods than beasts. Hair, then, was a betrayal of that ideal. To remove it was to rejoin the realm of order. You can almost hear the logic echoing through time. The animal grows hair, the divine does not. As the chanting rises, the air thickens with incense. The smoke swirls upward, curling into ribbons that vanish into the rafters. You watch how the priests move through it, unhurried, serene. Their skin catches the torchlight, shining softly through the haze. It's hypnotic. You start to understand why ancient rituals were so immersive. They weren't meant to impress an audience. They were meant to erase the self. The head priest takes up a cloth and wipes the statue of Thoth's beak, his motions precise, affectionate almost. He whispers a prayer you can finally catch. May you see clearly, may your words flow true. It's a blessing, but also a plea, for wisdom, for clarity, for the strength to keep order in a world that loves chaos. You glance around the room and realize something quietly profound. Every tool used here, the razors, the oils, the linen, the incense, represents the same ideal. Purity, order, control. The priests shaved their bodies not out of fear of filth, but out of a desire to keep chaos at bay. Cleanliness wasn't just next to godliness, it was godliness. A faint smile touches your lips as you imagine explaining this to a modern dermatologist. Why do you exfoliate daily? You'd ask. Oh, you know, they'd reply, to keep Apophis, the chaos serpent, from devouring the sun. Makes sense. Still, there's something touching about their devotion. These men lived in constant awareness of decay. Every day, they saw offerings rot, bodies mummified, sand swallow monuments. Their cleanliness rituals were, in their own way, a rebellion against death. You can't stop time, but you can stay smooth while it passes. The chanting softens. One by one, the priests bow their heads and press their palms to the floor. The stone is cold, and the air carries the faint scent of lotus and smoke. You notice how quiet it is. No whispers, no shuffling. Just breathing. For a moment, you almost join them. Then the head priest stands, signaling the end of the ceremony. The torches are extinguished one by one until only a single flame remains. The shadows grow thicker, the air cooler. The priests file out silently, leaving the gods to rest. You follow them, back through the corridors of hieroglyphs, back toward the open air where the stars now spill across the desert sky. As you step outside, the contrast hits you. The temple's perfect stillness gives way to the chaos of the night. Insects buzz, the wind howls faintly, and the Nile murmurs darkly in the distance. The priests move like pale ghosts through the moonlight, their robes catching silver edges. You realize how fragile their sanctuary is. One gust of sand, one careless hand, and all that perfection could vanish. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the act of trying, keeping things clean, holy, ordered, is what gives life meaning. Maybe the gods weren't asking for results, only effort. You sit by the temple wall, watching the priests disappear into the shadows of their quarters. Somewhere behind you, the statue of Thoth gleams faintly in the dark, oiled and spotless, ready for another day of divine upkeep. You can almost hear the whisper of razors being set down for the night, the sigh of relief from bodies too tired to be perfect any longer. For now, at least, both gods and priests can rest in the peace they've earned. The night deepens, and the temple fades into silence. Only the sound of the Nile remains, a slow, eternal breath. You sit for a while longer, staring at the water's surface, watching how the moonlight breaks into trembling silver shards. The priests are gone now, tucked away in their stone quarters, sleeping in perfect stillness like mummies still breathing. You almost expect the temple itself to exhale. When dawn comes, it does so without drama. Just a quiet blush over the horizon, the faint call of birds, and the hum of the waking city beyond the temple walls. You rise, stretch, and follow the faint rustle of movement back inside. The priests are already awake. Of course they are. Sleep is only another preparation for cleanliness. It must end early, before the first ritual bath. You watch as they file out again, bare feet against cold stone, their eyes still heavy but their bodies moving by habit. They head toward a small side court, where a long stone trough glistens with morning dew. This isn't the Nile, it's the temple's private water store, filled the previous night, still cool and clean. A priest dips a clay cup into it and pours the water slowly over his head, murmuring a phrase you've begun to recognize: "Wash away the dust of the night." There's something almost tender about it. You might expect a grand ceremony, but this is quiet, personal. The same act you do every morning, only with cosmic stakes. The water runs down his bald scalp, catching sunlight in rivulets. Around him, the other priests follow, some splashing more vigorously, others standing almost motionless as the water trickles over them. A soft breeze rolls through the courtyard, carrying the scent of lotus oil and damp stone. The rising sun catches the mist and turns it gold. For a moment, the scene feels suspended in time, like this morning could be any morning in any century. You could blink, and it might be 1200 BCE or yesterday. The ritual doesn't age. The priests begin the same process as always: dry, oil, polish, dress. You're close enough now to see how methodical they are. Each man tends to another's back, making sure no patch of skin remains untouched by oil. They work in silence, save for the faint squeak of linen and the splash of water. It's an odd intimacy, somewhere between brotherhood and devotion. You notice one younger priest sneaking glances toward the temple gate, where a small group of townspeople have gathered. They are not allowed inside, but they watch with reverence. Ordinary Egyptians rarely saw these rituals. Priests lived halfway between gods and men, set apart by smoothness and silence. The layman shaved sometimes, yes, but never so completely, never so often. To the people outside, the priests must have seemed otherworldly, living statues who somehow ate, laughed, and still glowed with sacred polish. Historians still argue whether this divide was intentional, whether priests exaggerated their rituals to maintain authority, or if it was genuine devotion. The debate goes on in dusty university corridors, while the Nile continues to flow as it always has. You suspect both are true. Faith and politics have always been clever bedfellows. As the priests finish dressing, you notice a small table near the entrance, set with bowls of strange ingredients: powdered limestone, natron, honey, and, again, that faintly suspicious jar of crocodile dung. One priest dips a finger into the mixture, smears a bit across his scalp, then covers it with a dab of oil. You wrinkle your nose, half horrified, half impressed. Ancient SPF 50, apparently. A fringe papyrus from the reign of Thutmose III mentions that the holy ointment kept away both the sun's wrath and evil spirits. You imagine the marketing pitch: protects against demons and UV rays. Modern science might roll its eyes, but you can't deny the practicality. Egypt's sun doesn't negotiate. Nearby, two older priests are debating something softly. You catch fragments of words: Ra, purity, the afterlife. One gestures toward his scalp, another toward the sky. You get the sense they are discussing what happens if a priest dies unshaven. Would his soul be denied entry to paradise, or would the gods forgive him mid-stubble? It's a theological hair-splitting worthy of eternity. You chuckle quietly to yourself. Some things never change. Once the final oils are applied, the priests line up in 2 rows. The head priest appears again, his movements slower this morning, more deliberate. He carries a bundle of folded linen in his arms, embroidered with faint gold thread. These are the garments of ritual, the cleanest clothes in all of Egypt, washed daily in natron and perfumed water, dried only in temple shade. No mortal filth touches them. He distributes the garments one by one. Each priest takes his robe with both hands, bows slightly, then slips it on with a small sigh of relief. The fabric glides over skin like air. The effect is stunning, a sea of white linen catching the morning light, as if the sun itself has chosen to walk among them. You feel an unexpected calm settle over you as you watch. Maybe it's the repetition, the way everything follows the same steps, the same words, the same rhythm. Maybe it's the smell of lotus and natron mixing in the air. Or maybe it's the realization that for all our modern noise, humanity has always found peace in routine. A bird cries somewhere above the courtyard, and the priests pause, heads lifting slightly toward the sound. It's just a falcon, but here, that matters. To them, it's Horus, or at least his messenger. You catch the faint smile that passes through the group, a private acknowledgement of divine timing. Then, without a word, they resume their tasks. The sun climbs higher, painting the temple walls in gold. You can see every hieroglyph now, every carved feather and eye. The priests file toward the main sanctuary again, their procession slow and silent. Each step seems to erase the boundary between man and God a little more. You linger behind, glancing down at the basin where they washed. The water is still clear, rippling slightly in the breeze. For a moment, you're tempted to touch it, just to feel what purity feels like. You don't, though. Somehow, it feels too sacred. Instead, you just watch the reflection of the sky trembling in the water and realize that maybe the priests weren't just washing their bodies. Maybe they were trying to keep the heavens from clouding over. In their endless cleaning, they were holding the world together, one smooth head at a time. The procession winds deeper into the temple's inner sanctum, where light itself becomes rare. The further you go, the more the air feels alive, heavy with incense, pulsing faintly, as if the walls themselves are remembering every prayer ever whispered inside. You notice the flicker of oil lamps ahead, their glow catching the priests' bald heads like small moons floating in the dark. The scene is both eerie and beautiful. You stay close behind, half hidden in the smoke, half mesmerized by how the priests move, smooth, silent, and perfectly synchronized. They've practiced this thousands of times, probably since boyhood. Each step, each breath is part of a choreography older than memory. And beneath that grace, there's still that stubborn sheen of oil on their skin, the quiet shimmer of perfection hard-won through razors and wax. They stop before a small doorway flanked by two statues of Anubis. The god of embalming, black jackal head, watchful eyes. You feel the temperature drop slightly, or maybe it's just your imagination. Inside the chamber, the scent changes, less floral, more metallic. This is where the real work begins. The priests of purification, the ones who tend not just to the living gods, but to the dead ones too. You realize you've crossed into the threshold of death, and yet, the cleanliness doesn't falter. If anything, it intensifies. The priests who serve Anubis are the most purified of all. They shave not just their heads and faces, but their entire bodies daily. Not a single hair must remain, not one, to ensure no impurity touches the dead. They even wear gloves of fine linen to keep their own sweat from tainting the sacred. A group of them is already gathered around a stone table, where an empty sarcophagus rests. They are preparing it for a nobleman whose body hasn't yet arrived. You notice how meticulously they work. One polishes the inside of the coffin with palm oil, another sprinkles natron crystals into its corners, a third murmurs a quiet incantation, asking for protection against decay. Historians still argue whether the purification of the priests mirrored that of the mummification process or inspired it. Either way, the connection is impossible to miss. The dead were cleansed just as thoroughly as the living priests, washed, shaved, oiled, wrapped. Cleanliness wasn't just preparation for worship, it was preparation for eternity. You remember what Herodotus once wrote, that Egyptian priests shaved their entire bodies every other day so that no lice or other impurity might adhere to them while serving the gods. You think about that phrase, other impurity. How delicately he put it. You can imagine him squirming as he watched some bald man with a razor and a jar of beeswax removing other impurity from very personal places in the name of holiness. Still, there's a strange kind of courage in it. These priests knew that death hovered constantly nearby. One illness, one infection, one stray insect bite, and the desert would reclaim you. Their obsession with purification wasn't madness, it was defiance. Against filth, against chaos, against decay. One priest kneels now beside the empty sarcophagus, dipping his fingers into a bowl of oil. He begins to smear it along the carved hieroglyphs, his touch slow and careful. The oil darkens the stone, giving it a kind of living sheen. You realize he's not just anointing the coffin, he's preparing it as though it were a body, as though stone too can be purified. There's something poignant about that. You wonder if they believed that by polishing the world enough, bodies, temples, sarcophagi, they could make even death itself shine. A fringe inscription from Abydos describes a curious ritual, priests shaving the corpse of a recently deceased noble before embalming. Whether symbolic or hygienic, the reasoning was the same, to separate the person from the animal. To make them smooth, clean, divine. You picture it, razors gliding over lifeless flesh, the air filled with whispered prayers, the dead man being readied for the afterlife with the same reverence the living gave to gods. You catch your reflection in one of the polished jars, a warped image, rippling in the oil's surface. You look oddly like the priests themselves now, hair darkened by the low light, skin caught in the golden haze. For a heartbeat, you can almost imagine belonging here, another figure in the eternal rhythm of scrub and prayer. A sound interrupts your thoughts, the faint slap of water. In a corner, another priest is washing his tools, bronze hooks, linen pads, small blades. He moves like a surgeon, precise and patient. Each tool is washed, dried, then placed on a folded cloth. He hums softly as he works, the tune repetitive and lulling, like a child's bedtime song. The air feels almost sacred, but not in the grand way of miracles, more in the quiet, disciplined holiness of repetition. You start to sense why this ritual lasted thousands of years. It isn't just faith, it's a kind of therapy. To control what you can, your body, your space, your cleanliness, in a world of unpredictable floods and plagues, must have felt like sanity itself. The priest finishes washing the tools and sets them aside. Then he pours the remaining water onto the floor and wipes it with the edge of his robe. No drop of death water must remain. Even the residue is treated with reverence. When they finally leave the chamber, you follow, stepping into sunlight again. The shift feels dizzying, like emerging from one world into another. You blink at the brightness, squinting as the heat rolls back over your skin. The Nile glints in the distance, steady and indifferent, the same as it was before all the rituals, all the purifications. And yet, standing there in the sun, you can't help feeling that something has changed. Maybe it's you. You feel lighter somehow, cleaner, though you've done nothing but watch. It's contagious, this devotion to purity, the way repetition becomes peace, the way care becomes sacred. You look down at your hands and imagine them slick with oil, gleaming like those of the priests. The world feels suddenly sharper, more deliberate. Maybe that's the secret they've known all along. Cleanliness isn't about removing dirt, it's about remembering that you can. The day stretches lazily as you follow the priests back to the outer courtyard. The sun is climbing higher now, hot and unwavering, scattering everything in brilliant light. Dust dances in its rays, tiny motes glimmering like gold. You notice that even here, in the open, The priests' heads shine like polished stones, completely impervious to the desert's chaos. Their skin glows, but it isn't just oil or wax. It's the calm that comes from discipline, from repeated, intentional action. A young acolyte approaches carrying a shallow bowl of water. He kneels beside a priest and begins the familiar routine: wash, oil, polish. The motions are identical to what you've already seen, yet there's a gentle variation. The touch is softer, careful, as if the boy fears hurting the perfection he's helping to create. Watching him, you remember your own early mornings, fumbling with tasks that seemed monumental at the time. You almost smile at the universality of clumsy devotion. This is where the odd elegance of their lives becomes clear. To the outside world, shaving heads daily might seem excessive, or even obsessive. Yet here, it is rhythm. It is meditation. It is the pulse of a world ordered according to divine law. Hey, those stubborn little filaments that refuse to be tamed, must be erased not out of vanity but to embody harmony itself. You glance at a fringe document you remember from a temple library. It claims that some priests even shaved the hair from their tongues. Yes, the tongue, before important rituals. Whether true or myth, it illustrates the depth of their obsession with total purity. Historians still argue whether such extreme measures were widely practiced or merely symbolic exaggerations. Regardless, the anecdote underscores the intensity of devotion. Nearby, an older priest gestures toward a small mirror. He inspects his scalp with meticulous care, tilting his head this way and that, tracing every contour with his eyes. The reflection ripples faintly in the bowl of water beside him. The ritual, you notice, isn't finished until the priest himself is satisfied with his reflection. There is no divine approval without human perfection first. You realize that what seems obsessive to outsiders is actually a negotiation with mortality. Every hair removed, every scrape of a razor, every application of oil and wax is a small assertion of order over chaos, life over entropy. In a land where the Nile could flood unpredictably, locusts could descend without warning, and the desert sun could bone flesh to leather in hours, control over the self was as sacred as control over the world. A soft breeze shifts the scent of the oils and beeswax, bringing hints of myrrh and lotus to your nose. You inhale slowly, almost hypnotically. You feel your own skin itching in response, as if it remembers how it shouldn't have, as if your own body is whispering that it too must be purified. The priests begin applying natron, a fine, chalky powder made from the desert salts. It's sprinkled onto skin and rubbed in, absorbing moisture, drawing out impurities, leaving a faint sheen like frost on smooth stone. The sensation looks uncomfortable, almost abrasive, yet the priests move calmly, rhythmically. Even discomfort is part of their meditation. Nearby, the young acolyte applies a small amount of beeswax over the natron, smoothing it with deliberate care. You watch as the wax melts slightly against the warmth of the priest's skin, creating a glossy finish that seems both practical and ceremonial. The combination of natron and wax is an ancient technology, both hygienic and symbolic, preserving purity while protecting against the harsh environment. Historians still argue whether natron's use in daily shaving was purely practical or had deeper religious connotations. You think it's both. Here, nothing is wasted, nothing casual. Every particle of salt, every drop of oil, every hair removed contributes to a vision of order in a world where chaos is always waiting. The priests finish and line up to examine each other's work. Heads tilt, shoulders shift, fingers trace arms and scalps. A slight nod of approval passes from the older priest to the younger acolyte. Small praise, almost imperceptible, yet it carries weight. You realize that in this culture, mastery is not loud. It is quiet, observed, and repeated endlessly. As they prepare to leave for another ritual, the sunlight glints off their bald heads once more, a living mirror reflecting the sky. The effect is dazzling, hypnotic, serene. You notice that the temple itself seems to glow alongside them, as though their discipline has illuminated not just themselves, but the very stones around them. For a moment, you catch yourself thinking that perhaps there is magic in all this. Not in the sense of spells or incantations, but in the profound human achievement of self-mastery. The bald, oiled, natron-dusted skin of the priests is a testament to the power of ritual, the power of habit, and the strange beauty of repeated care. And as you watch them vanish into the temple's inner corridors, you realize that this perfection isn't just for the gods. It is for themselves, for each other, and for the fragile sense of order that humans have always clung to in a world that never waits. The afternoon sun casts long, golden shadows across the temple courtyard. The heat is now a tangible presence, pressing against your skin, yet the priests move unfazed. Their heads gleam, polished to perfection, reflecting the sunlight in miniature, moving stars. You notice how the light seems to bend slightly around them, as if the air itself acknowledges their presence. Every movement is deliberate, each step a quiet testament to their discipline. You trail a pair of younger priests who are tending to a small garden within the temple walls. It is an oasis of greenery. Papyrus reeds sway gently, lotus flowers float on still water, and small herbs release faint, intoxicating fragrances. Here, even the act of tending plants is part of ritual purification. Water, oil, earth, sun, they are elements of cleanliness as much as they are of devotion. One priest bends, scooping a handful of soil, inspecting it for insects. Every particle is considered. Any tiny imperfection is corrected. Historians still argue whether these botanical duties were primarily symbolic, designed to maintain sacred balance, or whether they also served practical purposes, like cultivating medicinal plants for the temple. Likely, it was both. The practical and the spiritual are inseparable in this world. You watch as another priest kneels by the garden's edge, trimming lotus stems with a small bronze blade. There is a strange intimacy in the gesture, a reverence usually reserved for the divine. You realize that in their eyes, the difference between tending the plants and tending the gods is minimal. Both require attention, patience, and absolute care. Nearby, a faint scent of incense drifts over from the main hall, mingling with the earthy smell of wet soil and oil. It is overwhelming yet comforting. You find yourself taking deep, almost unconscious breaths, feeling more alert and serene at the same time. The rituals of the body and the environment blend seamlessly, creating a world where order is tangible and beauty emerges from discipline. A curious detail catches your eye. A small bird has landed on the edge of a water basin, pecking gently at a drop of water. One priest pauses, raising a hand not in annoyance, but in acknowledgement. The bird is allowed to drink and depart unharmed. Even the smallest creature is respected within this ecosystem of ritual and cleanliness. The priests now turn their attention back to themselves. With steady hands, they apply a mixture of natron and honey to their arms and shoulders. The texture is gritty but soothing, exfoliating the skin while leaving a faint shimmer. You notice that this simple act transforms them, not just physically, but in demeanor. Shoulders straighten, chins lift, eyes seem to hold a quiet focus that wasn't there moments before. Fringe records mention that some priests believed the exfoliating mixture could also remove spiritual impurities, remnants of negative thoughts or chaotic energies absorbed from the outside world. Historians still debate whether this belief was widespread or limited to particular temple schools. Either way, it's clear that physical and spiritual cleanliness were considered inseparable. You watch a young novice struggle slightly with the mixture, rubbing too hard and flinching. An older priest reaches over, guiding the novice's hand with patience. It is a gentle lesson. Devotion is not innate, It is learned through repetition, attention, and mentorship. You sense the same principle at work in every aspect of their lives, from shaving to tending gardens to ceremonial chanting. The sun continues its climb, and the priests finish their morning ablutions and garden work. Their skin now glows with oil and natron, the hairless surfaces reflecting light in a way that is almost mesmerizing. They gather near the main hall, readying themselves for the next sequence of prayers and offerings. You feel an almost hypnotic rhythm in the temple, a cadence built over generations. The constant care for bodies, the environment, and the tools creates a flowing order that is deeply calming. Even as an observer, you feel pulled into the cycle, your breathing syncing unconsciously with theirs. One priest pauses to adjust a small bundle of linen, running his fingers along the folds to ensure perfect alignment. The gesture is mundane and sacred at once. You realize that in this culture, devotion is found in minutiae, in the relentless attention to detail, and in the gentle, unbroken acts that make a space holy. As you step back, observing them file toward the inner sanctuary, you can't help but marvel at the strange, beautiful logic of their lives. Smooth skin, polished tools, tended gardens, scented oils. All of it is part of a single, coherent philosophy. The world can be ordered, purified, and made serene, one deliberate act at a time. And somehow, watching them, you feel yourself part of that order, even if only for a fleeting moment. The afternoon wanes, and the temple's shadows stretch long across the cool stone floors. You follow the priests to a narrow corridor lined with shelves of jars, bundles of linen, and small carved statues. The air here is thick with the mingling scents of incense, oil, and herbs. Every object seems meticulously arranged, almost as if the shelves themselves had been trained to serve the divine. You notice a small brass mirror resting atop a carved pedestal, reflecting a halo of light onto the wall. Even light, it seems, is part of their ritual. The priests begin preparing for another round of personal purification. You watch as they dip their fingers into small jars of oil, rubbing it along their hairless arms, necks, and faces. Each movement is precise, deliberate, almost meditative. You can't help but notice the almost absurd care with which they treat their skin. One slip, one missed spot, could disturb the delicate illusion of perfection they've cultivated. Fringe texts hint at even more extreme measures. Some priests would shave eyebrows or eyelashes before particularly sacred ceremonies, believing that every hair carried the residue of worldly imperfection. Historians still argue whether this was widespread practice or an isolated custom, perhaps exaggerated by travelers' tales. You chuckle softly, imagining a priest examining his eyelashless reflection in a tiny bronze mirror and deciding, yes, today I am closer to divinity. Nearby, a young acolyte carefully polishes a set of bronze razors, dipping each into perfumed water before laying it on a linen cloth. You notice the rhythmic sound of metal against cloth and water, soft, almost musical, like a heartbeat echoing through the corridor. Each tool is sacred. A dull edge is not just inconvenient but disrespectful. To serve the gods with a blunt blade would be akin to offering stale bread at the altar. A senior priest steps forward, brushing his fingertips lightly along his smooth scalp. The oil gleams under the lamplight, and you realize the act itself is both practical and symbolic. The skin, polished and glistening, becomes a mirror reflecting order. Chaos cannot touch a surface that is entirely controlled. You think of the deserts beyond the temple walls, the relentless sun, the biting wind. Out there, disorder reigns. Here, in this sanctuary, it is banished. The air hums with quiet movement. One priest pours a small amount of natron onto his hands, rubbing it gently over his shoulders and chest. The powder absorbs moisture and purifies simultaneously. The action is repeated with careful attention, as if each stroke is a line in an ongoing prayer. You sense that the rhythm itself, scrape, rub, polish, is a mantra, a way to summon calm and focus. Some priests apply a thin layer of beeswax over the treated areas, allowing it to melt slightly into their skin. You notice the subtle shine it leaves behind, not ostentatious, but enough to catch the light in a way that seems almost otherworldly. You remember the courtyard earlier, the gleaming heads, and see now that every ritual, every polish, every layer of wax, is part of a continuum. There is no start or end, just repetition and refinement. A small group gathers near the shelves of linen, folding garments with perfect symmetry. Each robe, carefully washed in natron and scented water, is placed with its folds aligned like lines of sacred text. Even clothing, you realize, is part of the purification ritual. To wear it improperly would be to disrespect the order they maintain in every other aspect of life. You begin to notice a subtle interplay between pain and pleasure. Natron and beeswax exfoliate and protect, yes, but they also scratch and stick. Razors glide, sometimes nicking, sometimes tugging. There is discomfort in pursuit of perfection. You sense that the priests accept it willingly because the reward, smoothness, holiness, and the illusion of control, is greater than the momentary sting. Historians still debate how much of this meticulous attention to body and tools was motivated by religious fervor and how much by social hierarchy. Was it devotion or status? Perhaps both. In any case, the ritual reinforces the priestly identity. Disciplined, hairless, gleaming, and apart from ordinary men. Their entire being is a demonstration of order, an embodiment of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance. By the time they finish, the corridor is silent except for the faint hum of their breathing. The polished heads, glinting tools, and scented oils create a subtle sense of awe. You realize the temple itself seems transformed, not by gods alone, but by the constant, careful devotion of those who inhabit it. And as you step back into the main hall, the evening light filtering through latticed windows, you understand that their ritualized smoothness is more than hygiene or devotion. It is a philosophy, a rhythm, and a promise that through careful attention, humans can touch the divine, even if only briefly. The sun dips lower, turning the temple's sandstone walls into molten gold. Shadows stretch long and soft across the courtyards, curling into every crevice. You follow the priests as they move in slow procession toward the sanctuary, their bald heads gleaming like tiny suns themselves. There is a calm to their steps, almost hypnotic, and you feel the rhythm seeping into your own body, easing your shoulders, slowing your breath. Inside the sanctuary, the air is cooler, scented with thick incense and the faint trace of lotus oil. You notice the priests pausing at the base of a statue of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. His green stone face gleams faintly in the firelight, and the priests bow, pressing their palms together, then raising them in a careful salute. You realize that even posture is ritualized here. There is no slouching, no casual glance. Every movement matters. You observe one priest dipping his fingers into a small alabaster jar filled with a creamy mixture of oils and natron. He spreads it over his arms and head with deliberate care. It's the same mixture you've seen before, yet each application feels personal, tailored, almost intimate. Fringe texts suggest that some priests believed that certain blends of oil could attract divine attention more effectively than others. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or an actual belief in efficacy, but either way, the result is beautiful, almost hypnotic. Nearby, a young acolyte hurries slightly, adjusting the folds of the robes on a senior priest. The older man doesn't scold him, he simply exhales, shoulders easing, a small smile touching his face. You notice how mentorship and care are embedded in every act. Even the smallest mistake is an opportunity for correction, a teaching moment wrapped in devotion. The priests arrange themselves in 2 parallel lines along the sanctuary stone floor. Their shaved heads, oiled and dusted with natron, reflect the flickering torchlight. You can see the veins in their arms, the small lines in their hands, the subtle tension in muscles trained over decades. Every inch of them is prepared to embody order. It's more than aesthetic, it's symbolic. Smooth, clean skin represents control, discipline, and alignment with cosmic balance. One priest kneels before a small basin of water and pours it slowly over his hands, letting it trickle down over his shoulders. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost musical. You think of the Nile outside, steady and eternal. The water here is like a small echo of that vast river, a personal purification that mirrors the broader cleansing of the world. Historians still argue whether priests shaved their bodies entirely daily, weekly, or only before major rituals. Evidence is inconclusive, yet the emphasis on hairlessness is unmistakable. Hair, after all, was thought to trap impurities, both physical and spiritual. Removing it is an act of control, a reclamation of self, a statement that chaos will not have dominion here. You glance at one priest smoothing his scalp with oil, the gleam making him appear almost ethereal. The mixture contains moringa, myrrh, and occasionally subtle hints of honey. The effect is twofold. It protects the skin against the sun and insects, but it also creates a sense of ritual beauty. They are polished for the gods and for themselves, a constant reminder that care and devotion are inseparable. A soft breeze moves through the sanctuary, shifting incense smoke in gentle curls. You notice the interplay of light and shadow, polished heads and reflective surfaces. It's mesmerizing, so much so that you feel yourself nearly dissolving into the rhythm, losing track of time. In this space, everything trivial is stripped away, leaving only the quiet insistence of ritual. Nearby, a senior priest removes a small strip of beeswax from a bowl and carefully applies it to his arm. You wince slightly at the imagined sting, but the priest's movements are calm, even meditative. Pain, you realize, is part of the equation. It heightens attention, underscores devotion, and reinforces the lesson that perfection requires effort. Historians still debate whether the waxing rituals were meant primarily for aesthetics, hygiene, or spiritual symbolism. You suspect it was all three. In this culture, practicality and faith are inseparable. Every action, no matter how small, is both a tool and a prayer. As the sun finally touches the horizon, spilling warm gold across the temple, the priests finish their final touches. Their heads and arms gleam, robes fall perfectly along the floor. They bow, rising slowly, eyes closed, in a gesture that is part prayer, part meditation. You sense that this act of shaving, oiling, and polishing isn't just about cleanliness. It is an offering, an embodiment of discipline and devotion, a living prayer rendered in skin and motion. The sanctuary grows quiet, the only sound the soft hiss of incense and the distant whisper of the Nile. You feel a gentle calm wash over yourself, a quiet awe at the order and care, and a subtle longing to move with that same deliberate precision, if only for a moment. Twilight descends slowly, softening the sharp lines of the temple into gentle shadows. You follow the priests as they return to the outer courtyards, their heads still gleaming, their robes flowing like liquid in the fading light. The heat of the day has softened, leaving a warm, dry breeze that carries the faint scent of lotus and beeswax across the stone floors. The world feels suspended, caught between day and night, and you realize this is when the priests' rituals feel most magical. They pause near the temple's reflecting pools, small basins filled with Nile water that mirror the sky. Each priest carefully dips his hands and pours water over his head, letting it trickle down with a slow, deliberate rhythm. You watch the droplets glimmer like tiny jewels as they slide over perfectly shaved skin. There is a serenity in the act, a rhythm that seems to echo the eternal flow of the river itself. A young acolyte mirrors the actions of an older priest, learning not just the motions but the calm intention behind them. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but you see it. A shift in posture, a deepening of breath, a slight narrowing of focus. The ritual is not just about physical cleanliness, it's training the mind to move in harmony with sacred order. Fringe sources mention that some temples believe that any hair left on the body could attract negative spiritual attention. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or limited to elite circles, but in practice, the result is clear. Smooth skin equaled spiritual readiness. You can almost sense that the priest's smoothness is a shield, protecting them from chaos, from mortality, and from the world outside. The priests begin the familiar routine of natron and oil. You watch the powder cling to their skin, absorbing sweat and impurities, leaving a faint white shimmer. The oil follows, melting into the powder, leaving a glossy, almost liquid perfection. Their movements are rhythmic, almost hypnotic. You feel yourself involuntarily syncing with their cadence, your own breathing slowing, your awareness sharpening and softening at once. Nearby, the older priests inspect the bronze razors, sharpening edges against whetstones, the soft scrape sounding like a heartbeat through the quiet courtyard. Every blade gleams, each edge precise, ready to restore and maintain perfection. One priest hums softly, the tune blending with the distant sound of water trickling from the reflecting pool. It's subtle, almost meditative, the sound of devotion made audible. You notice a curious detail, a small jar labeled ointment of clarity, likely a mix of oil, honey, and rare herbs, sits beside a basin. A priest dips his fingers and applies it to his temples, whispering softly. Fringe texts suggest this ointment was believed to enhance mental focus, keeping the mind sharp for ritual precision. Historians still argue about its exact ingredients and purpose, but the intent is unmistakable. Clarity in body and mind was inseparable. As the final rays of sunlight fade, the priests begin a quiet inspection of each other's work. Heads tilt, shoulders shift, hands trace arms and backs, ensuring no stray hair or patch of powder has been missed. The gestures are gentle but precise, a living check on devotion and discipline. You notice the subtle nods of approval, the quiet murmurs that pass between them. Even in silence, communication is constant. A breeze stirs the surface of the reflecting pool, sending ripples that mirror the flickering torchlight. You realize that for these men, every act of shaving, oiling, and polishing is part of a continuous meditation, a dialogue with the world, the gods, and themselves. Even their hairless skin is a statement: control, order, and harmony over chaos. The evening rituals conclude with the priests standing in a line, facing west toward the setting sun. Their skin gleams, their robes fall perfectly, and their heads catch the last light like polished stones. It is a tableau of devotion, discipline, and serene beauty. You feel an almost physical sense of calm settle over you, as if the temple's order has seeped into your bones. As they file into their quarters, you linger, watching the last glimmer of gold fade from the walls. For a moment, the temple exists solely in your perception: smooth heads, oiled skin, gleaming tools, and the faint scent of incense and lotus hanging in the cooling air. You understand now that every act, no matter how small, has purpose. The ritual is complete, but the sense of order it instills is eternal. Night falls fully, and the temple is bathed in the soft, cool glow of oil lamps. Shadows flicker along the walls, dancing over the polished heads of the priests as they move through the final tasks of the day. You notice how quiet everything has become. The distant hum of the Nile is barely audible, insects chirp softly, and even the wind seems hesitant to disturb the order of this sacred place. There's a weightless serenity here, a deliberate slowing of the world that feels almost unreal. The priests gather in the inner sanctum one last time, performing a ritual so subtle it would be easy to miss. A gentle inspection of their bodies, a final smoothing of oil over shoulders, arms, and scalps, and the meticulous folding of their linen robes. The air smells faintly of honey, myrrh, and lotus. You inhale slowly, feeling it seep into your consciousness. Each movement seems both mundane and miraculous, a testament to the extraordinary discipline that defines their lives. You watch as one priest dips his fingers into a small bowl of water, pouring it slowly over his head and shoulders, letting it trickle down and gather in a tiny basin. There's a rhythm to this, like a heartbeat or the slow pulse of the universe. You realize that even after centuries, even after countless repetitions, these acts retain their power, not because they are new or flashy, but because they are deliberate and intentional. Fringe papyri suggest that in some temples, priests would even shave the tiny hairs of their nostrils or the backs of their hands before particularly sacred ceremonies. Historians still debate how widely this practice was observed, but the underlying principle is clear: every detail matters. Imperfection, even in the smallest form, is a breach of order, and order is the lifeblood of devotion. You notice the faint sound of chanting, so soft it seems to come from the walls themselves. The priests do not rush. Their voices are low, intimate, almost hypnotic. It is a lullaby of order, a chant that binds body, mind, and space into a single rhythm. You can feel yourself drawn into it, your own thoughts slowing, your own muscles relaxing. Even your heartbeat seems to sync with the soft cadence of devotion. A young acolyte finishes polishing a bronze razor, laying it gently on a linen cloth. The older priests nod in quiet approval. You sense that mastery here is measured not in spectacle but in care. Care for the body, care for the tools, care for the gods, and care for one another. Every act of smoothness, every swipe of oil, every careful fold of linen is a meditation, a prayer, and a statement of human agency in a world that is often uncontrollable. Historians still argue whether the daily shaving and purification was primarily religious, hygienic, or a combination of both. Standing here now, you understand it is inseparable. Each stroke of the razor and every layer of oil is at once practical, symbolic, and sacred. The act itself is the devotion, and the devotion itself is the act. As the lamps burn lower, the final ritual concludes. The priests bow, hands pressed to the stone floor, heads glinting in the faint glow. Silence settles, full and deep. You sense the temple breathing around you, a living organism shaped by centuries of care and discipline. Even the walls seem to shimmer faintly, reflecting the smooth perfection of the priests who serve within. You step back, feeling the calm of the temple wash over you. For a moment, all chaos is held at bay: dust, sun, insects, mortality. And what remains is order, ritual, and the extraordinary human pursuit of purity. The priests retreat to their quarters, leaving the sanctuary empty but alive with the echoes of devotion. You linger, taking in the smell of oils, the shimmer of lamplight, and the quiet perfection of polished stone and bald heads. There is a strange intimacy here, a sense that through repetition, discipline, and care, humans can touch something eternal, however fleetingly. Even as you prepare to leave, the rhythm of the temple remains, a soft, guiding pulse that lingers in your awareness. As the temple settles into complete silence, you feel yourself breathing more slowly, the tension of the day leaving your muscles like water draining from a basin. The lamps have burned low, leaving only the faint glow of stars through the temple's open lattice windows. Outside, the Nile murmurs quietly, unhurried and constant, a lullaby older than the pyramids themselves. You can sense the devotion, the ritual care, and the polished perfection lingering in the air, softening everything it touches. The priests have gone to rest, their heads still gleaming faintly in memory, their bodies scented with lotus, myrrh, and beeswax. Even their absence is ordered. Every folded robe, every cleaned tool, every smoothed surface remains as evidence of their quiet dedication. You imagine them sleeping lightly, aware that tomorrow will bring the same rhythm: shaving, bathing, oiling, tending, praying, polishing. And in that endless repetition, there is a kind of serenity that touches you even as a mere observer. You allow yourself to sink into that calm, imagining your own hands gliding over smooth surfaces, your own breath in time with the steady cadence of ritual. The desert, the river, the wind, all of it feels softened, almost intimate. There is a gentle reassurance in the knowledge that order is possible, that care matters, that even small, repeated actions ripple through time in subtle ways. Now, dim the lights, and let the images of polished skin, oiled surfaces, and serene faces of the priests drift through your mind like soft waves. Allow yourself to float with the rhythm of devotion, letting the temple's quiet glow lull your thoughts into ease. The world outside may be chaotic, but for tonight, you are here, enveloped in calm, carried gently by centuries of ritual, and soothed by the unwavering discipline of those who sought perfection through simplicity and care. Let yourself drift, carried by the serene echo of polished devotion.